Good morning, Christian Church of Litchfield. Hey, we're glad you're here. We welcome you to our services. If you're visiting with us today, we are very happy to have you with us today and pray there'll be a blessing to you. Today we wrap up kind of the entire summer. We've been looking at characters in the Bible, and we've been looking at David for the last few weeks, defining moments. And today we wrap up the series of messages on the life of King David. And we're going to see how that some of his last recorded words become truly a defining moment in David's life that we want to look at today. It really shows where the heart of David is. And that's the question I want you to be asking yourself today, because it is a defining moment. Where's my passion? Where's my heart? A funeral procession pulled into a cemetery. Carload after carload of family and friends followed a fancy black pickup truck pulling a fishing boat with a casket on it. Two people across the street watching it, one of them said, "That guy had to be an avid fisherman." The other man replied, "He still is. After they bury his wife, he set it out to the lake." Now, there's no question where that guy's heart was. I think his passion was misplaced. But nevertheless, his passion was fishing. Where's your passion? Where is your heart? Who is it that really has you? And the real test of it is going to be seen today in the life of David. We're going to pick up our scripture today in 1 Chronicles chapter 28, and we read beginning with verse 2. David rose to his feet and said, "My brothers and my people, it was my desire to build a temple where the ark of the Lord's covenant, God's footstool, could rest permanently. I made the necessary preparations for building it." Look at the next two words. But God. We're going to focus in on them just a second. But God said to me, "You must not build a temple to honor my name, for you are a warrior and have shed much blood." Today's message is a little bit different. We're just breaking it down into two main parts. There's no outline in your bulletin, but you can follow along on the PowerPoint. Here we are in this first section. From the two verses I read, I've narrowed it down to one phrase that we want to focus on. David said, and here's the defining moment, "It was my desire, but God had other plans." It's a defining moment on how you respond when you have all these great plans. But God's plan is different than yours. David, his one desire was to build a temple. And it's interesting, this is his farewell speech. Now, most presidents, when they're going out of office, as they give their last speech, they usually focus on what? Their accomplishments. Well, I did this, this improved, that improved, and they just go over all that they accomplished. Let me tell you, nobody could have cited more accomplishments than King David. He didn't talk about, let me tell you about that time that big guy named Goliath. Boy, did I do a number on him. Yeah. He didn't talk about that. He didn't talk about being king of Israel and the victory after victory he won for them and took them to the very pinnacle of her power. Instead of focusing on all that he had done, you see the humble heart of David, and he said, "The one thing I really wanted to do, I wanted to build a temple because I love God so much. And it's just not right." He says, "I live in a palace and God lives in a shack." And he had done the preparations. There were blueprints. There were architects. There was all kinds of preparations. It wasn't accomplished. Not because David got discouraged, not because the people didn't care and follow his leadership. They did. They brought so much material we found earlier in 1 Chronicles chapter 22 before this that they brought more than enough. They couldn't even count the supplies that were brought in to build the temple. Everything was in place. And God says, you're the wrong man. We're not going to do it. Not with you. Rejected. How do you handle those rejection slips? When you got these plans, but God has other plans. Here's the question we put before you today. How do you respond to the but God moments in your life? When you have all these plans for life, but God has other plans. You know, there are some words that become conjunction words. A conjunction is where things shift. For an example, if I said, I wanted to fly to Denver, and I did. That word and is a green light. I wanted to go to Denver, I fly to Denver, I did fly to Denver. The word however is a yellow light. I wanted to fly to Denver. However, because of the weather, the flight was delayed an hour. I still got to Denver. The three-letter word but is a red light. Says no, you're not going. I wanted to fly to Denver, but an emergency came up at home. I couldn't go. I wanted to fly to Denver, but the flight was canceled. No, you're not going. They canceled it. So our question is, how do you handle those but God moments when those red lights come up? It's a defining moment, how you respond. And it's really the test of discipleship. It's the real test as to where our heart is in our relationship with God, folks. One young man waited till he was in his early 30s to marry. He prayed for years that God would bring the right gal. And God did. And they dated for some time and were deeply in love. And after they got married, they moved out west, bought a ranch. They had their future all planned out. But less than 3 years later, his wife was killed in a car accident. You have all these plans, but God. How do you respond to the but God moments in life? A young man that was in his mid-20s was named Willem. Back in the 1800s, he lived in Belgium. And he lived in a small community that was a coal mining community. And one day there was an explosion, and several people in the village, small village, were injured, and he began to minister to the needy people, the hurt people. He attended to those who were injured. He nursed them back to health. He helped the needy. He would go without just to give to the people. And he began to preach. And he felt that was his calling. And he couldn't be happy. And the little church was growing and growing. And people loved this guy that loved them and served them and ministered to them and cared about their needs. But there's that three-letter word. But one day, one of his superiors from the religious hierarchy that he was a part of came to visit the small village and looked over the church. And that superior never saw the heart of Willem. He just saw him living. In fact, he had pants that were made out of burlap sacks. And he says, you're not fit. You're not dressed for ministry. And he tried to explain. He says, I was glad to go without so that I could minister to people that didn't have anything either. And the needs are so great. He was unimpressed, the superior. And he threw Willem out of the church and out of ministry. How do you handle those moments when you got plans and somebody else has different plans. Most of us don't accept our plans being upset very well. Do you? I mean, when you have these plans and somebody just upsets the apple cart, do you take it well? I don't. I had that happen this week. And Friday morning, Andy and McKenna and Cooper and I took some hogs to Trenton for processing. And we pull up there to unload. There's already a truck ahead of us. And we get out, met the young man that was from Missouri. He had one hog in the truck. And he had a gate that where the whole end gate slide would swing open. And I said, this is going to be tough. He says, well, with you guys' help, I think we can do this. And so we get on each side. He gets in the trailer to try and unload his hog. It's a small hog. And lo and behold, that hog came out, and he was a conjunction. But, B-U-T, he had other plans. And his plans were not to go into that processing plant. His plan was to go under the swing gate, and under it he went. He went under it just like a scared rabbit. And the race was on. The guy that owned him took off running. I took off running. Andy took off running. The butcher took off running, hollering for more people and help. And pretty soon we had about 7 of us running. That pig showed us how out of shape we are. And we have no business running at my age. But we ran. God is my witness. We ran for nearly 4 blocks, chasing that pig. That was a conjunction. He did not cooperate with our plans. That guy had plans for him. The pig had other plans. And so far, the pig was winning. The only thing that irritated me was on the other side of the street was this gal. And she's running down the street with a video camera, videoing this whole thing. I said, so help me, if this appears on the Channel 2, 5 o'clock news tonight, I am going to be really upset, you know. That's our preacher chasing that pig, you know. And he's losing, you know. And so finally the butcher said, he's probably more out of shape than I. He says, I can't go nowhere, I'm going back. I says, me too. And finally, a long time later, they got him and had to take the truck trailer, load him up where they had him cornered somewhere. But that was a conjunction. It just upset the whole apple cart. That's not how we had planned it out. How many days go like that for you where you say, oh, this is my day off. I have these plans where I'm just going to sit back and do nothing, but then the phone rings. Somebody stops by. At the end of the day, you go, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I should have been at work. It had been so much easier. You had that conjunction where, kapooey, everything just blew apart. The question is this. I know what you're asking. Why? Why do we need these but God moments in our life? Why do we need the but God moments in life? I mean, are they really necessary? Why do we need them? That's the question I put before you today. Well, I'm going to read an excerpt from Lucado, but before I do, I want to suggest to you, based on what he says in his book, it's this. The but God moments teach us it's not about my glory, it's about God's glory. The but God moments teach us I'm not at the center of the universe, but God is. Bear with me for just a couple of minutes. It's just a couple of short pages here. That's a very short book, as you can see. I think Lucado says something here in this book that really brings home, as only he could do, what we're talking about today. And if you haven't read this book, I would suggest you get it. You can probably order it online used for $1 or less. It's Not About Me by Max Lucado. Here's what he says. Just listen to these couple of short pages. God does not exist to make a big deal out of us. We exist to make a big deal out of him. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's all about him. Lucado says it's the moon. It was a full moon last night, Still up this morning when I got up. The moon models our role. What does the moon do? She generates no light. Contrary to the lyrics of the song, this harvest moon cannot shine on. Apart from the sun, the moon is nothing more than pitch black, pockmarked rock. But properly positioned, the moon beams. Let her do what she was made to do, and a clod of dirt becomes a source of inspiration and the source of more romance than the world could dream of. The moon simply reflects a greater light. She's happy to do so, the moon is. You never hear the moon complaining. She makes no waves about making waves. Let the cow jump over her or astronauts step on her, she never objects. Even though sunning is accepted while mooning is the butt of bad jokes, you won't hear old Cheeseface grumble. That's because he says the moon is at peace in her place. And because she accepts her role, a soft light touches a dark earth. What would happen if we accepted our place as sun reflectors? Oh, he says, this is a radical change we're talking about. We've been demanding, he says, our way and stamping our feet since infancy. We are all born with a default drive set on selfishness. He says, I want a spouse who makes me happy, co-workers who always ask my opinion. I want weather that suits me, and traffic that helps me, and a government that serves me, and a church that pleases me. It's all about me. Self-promotion, self-preservation, self-centeredness. It's me. But then he asks, he says, what does this philosophy create? Chaos. And he uses an analogy, Mark Yark, that you'll appreciate. He says, what if a symphony orchestra followed such an approach? Can you imagine an orchestra with an it's all about me outlook? Each artist clamoring for self-expression. Tubas blasting nonstop. Percussionist pounding to get attention. The cellist shoving the flutist out of the center stage chair. The trumpeter standing atop the conductor's stool, tooting his horn. Sheet music disregarded. Conductor ignored. Harmony? Anything but harmony, he says. More like pain. And lots of it. He says, no wonder our homes are so noisy. Our businesses so stress-filled. Our government so cutthroat. And harmony even so rare in the church. If you think about it, it's because it's become all about me instead of all about God. Man, he nails it, doesn't he? On the cover of the book, he has, it's like a prayer. God, rescue us from the life we thought would make us happy. Later on in that book, he has this quote that we're putting up on the PowerPoint. When our deepest desire is not the things of God, not a favor from God, but just simply God himself, we cross a major threshold. When we say, God, I simply want you. I don't need anything else. I don't want this, give me that. Please. I just want to be with you. I just want to worship you. That was David. Now, let's read on. 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 4. The very next verse says, yet the Lord, the God of Israel, has chosen me from among my father's family to be king over Israel forever. So the question is, how did David respond to the God moment in his life when things didn't go his way? You know, how did he respond? He says, yet the Lord has chosen me. We looked at the red light, nope. And none of us like being told no. So it's a defining moment. How do you respond to God when he changes your plans? David's response is, yet God has chosen me. Did he throw a temper tantrum? Did he get discouraged? He said, well, if that's the way you're going to be, I'm not going to do anything. He says, let me tell you, God is so good. Look what he's done for me. He focused on his blessings. He said, he took me from sleeping in a pasture to sleeping in a palace. Only God could do that. God has chosen me. He took me from shepherding sheep to being king of Israel. Look what God has done for me. He says, who am I to complain? God is so good. And when he says, I look at my life and see what he's done for me, I just got to cry out in adoration and praise and say, yet God, he's so good. This is it, folks. These are his last words. And these last words become a defining moment. He could handle the rejections of life, the but God's, the no answers, and say, yet God has been so good to me. Can you do that? Can I do that? Hey, tell you what, I want to go back. Remember that guy that wanted to be a preacher named Willem? Back in the 1800s there in Belgium as he was serving a small, poor coal mining community. Remember that guy and the injustice? His heart was right, everything was right, but the church threw him out as from being a preacher. How did he handle it? He was angry. He was discouraged. But God became a yet God, because one day he stayed in the same small village. He saw a coal miner carrying a load of coal on his back, bent over and stooped, and he could see the heavy load this miner was struggling to carry. Out of the clear blue, he just grabbed some paper and he began to sketch that coal miner. Didn't look much like the coal miner. Threw it away, grabbed another sheet, and again began to follow the coal miner and sketch him. The church rejected him as a preacher. The hierarchy did anyway. But what the hierarchy rejected, the world would fall in love with. Not his work from the pulpit, but his work as a painter. He went on to compose and paint some of the most unbelievable paintings in history. Vincent Willem van Gogh would go on, and we're going to put up some of his paintings and just let you know what the but God turned into a yet God. Here's one of Dr. Gatchett. He struggled with bouts of depression, and a doctor that he came to love and appreciate and served him, he did a portrait of, and I think it's fetched in today's dollars well over $100 million. One painting. And he painted a doctor that he had a special bond with. And the world fell in love with his work. The next work is The Starry Night. That's probably the most popular. It's never really sold. It's estimated, and you can only guess, maybe $200 million. Another Van Gogh painting. Unbelievable. But there's a third one I want to put up, and it too brought an astronomical price in today's dollars. And it's irises. Van Gogh struggled with bouts of deep depression to the point where he self-mutilated himself. At one point, he even cut off one of his ears, and they took him and they put him into an asylum in France to get the help that he needed. There, in his last years of his life, in that asylum, he did some of his finest work. Who wants to be confined to an asylum? But there was a garden outside the doors of flowers, of irises. And it inspired him to paint that garden in that asylum. And the world fell in love with the work of his hands. But God, yet God has chosen me. He had plans to be a preacher. And we could argue he probably would have been a good one. But for whatever reason, he got a but God. Maybe not from God, but from people. And yet God turned it into an incredible masterpiece. He did it for David, did it for Van Gogh. And you know, he wants to do it to you and I. Look at David. We're going to look up some scripture now. 1 Chronicles 29:11. These are some of the last words, the last prayer recorded of David. He says, yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. Everything in the heavens and on earth is yours, O Lord, and this is your kingdom. Today he would say, this is his church. We adore you as the one who is over all things. Another passage we have from 1 Chronicles chapter 28. He says, but who am I? And who are my people that we could give anything to you, God? He says, we think we're going to give God something. Who are we? He has it all. He holds our very next heartbeat in his hand. Everything we have comes from you. This is why he's a man after God's own heart. He messed up big time, we saw last week. But boy, does he finish strong in praising God. Everything we have comes from you, and we give you only what you first gave us. We are here for only a moment, visitors and strangers in this land as our ancestors were before us. Our days on earth are like a passing shadow, gone so soon without a trace. Man, that's where our focus needs to be. Not on the but God moments saying, look what's happened to me, but the yet God. Look what God's done for me. In the New Testament, we find this admonishment from Philippians chapter 2, verse 14. Do everything without complaining and arguing. And later on in that passage, he says, so that you may be like children of the light, so you can shine for God. That's the real test. I got the Message version up there too. Do everything readily and cheerfully. No bickering, no second guessing allowed. Let's go back to this top one up here. Philippians 2:14 in the New Living Translation. It says, do everything without complaining and arguing. Would you like to repeat that with me? Probably not, but let's do it anyway, okay? All right, let's say that one together. Do everything without complaining and arguing. Now, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get some nasty emails. Somebody says, I told my spouse that this week, and it didn't go over very good. I told my mom and dad that, and I know. But that's what God calls us to do. Focus on the yet God, not the but gods, where we have that conjunction, flashing, red light. But on what we do have and the blessings we do have. Do you think it would radically change the atmosphere of our homes if we could just put this one verse into practice like David did? Oh, yeah. What do you think could happen to our workplace? What do you think could happen, in our community, in our neighborhood, in our relationships with all of our friends, if we begin to do what God's called us to do? Yet God has chosen me. Are you a complainer, or are you one who is focused on the incredible blessings of God? Folks, if you want this church to grow, if you want this church to grow beyond any of our expectations here today, including my own, let's just start putting that verse into practice. It'll create more harmony, and it'll give a stronger witness in this community when people say, it's not about them. they live as like the moon, just to reflect the greater light. It's all about God. It's not about me. There's one other verse I think we're going to put up with it. And as we get ready to wrap it up today and close, it's this verse. And it's God's response when David says, I had intended, to build that temple. Did God say, Philly, that's a stupid idea? Man, how dumb can you be, David? No. But the Lord said to my father, David, Solomon would write later, you did well to have it in your heart to build a temple for my name. You see, when we take the but God moments in life and we respond with a yet God, he gives incredible credit to the person who says, I failed. I wanted to do this for God. I wanted to do that. I never got to. He's a God who judges the heart and the intent. That's the defining moment. When our life is over and we stand before him, it's going to be a hard issue, folks. How about your heart? Is it right with God? Let's stand and sing our decision hymn.